Hi, my name is PDS Gibson, and I'm the owner and founder of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video where we provide personal development content for the subconscious mind. And today we're going to talk a little bit about why there's a sense of feeling deadness or numbness as your emotional undertone throughout the day and what we can do about it. So first and foremost, I want to recognize, I've had people coming to me, new people I've met this week who mentioned something along these lines to me. And, I want to recognize how painful this can be for people and just take a moment to validate that. One of the most challenging parts of feeling a lack of aliveness inside or a sense of numbness is that you feel so disempowered. It can even feel disempowering or I don't want to say unnecessary, but very difficult to even want to get out of this emotional state because there's such a sense of meaninglessness at times for individuals suffering or struggling through this that it's like, well, why would I even bother exerting energy into anything? And so I really want to get into some of the root causes of why this emotional undertone has come about and how we can start making tiny but consistent changes in order to really climb out of this. So I put together some key concepts that I think will be really empowering. This doesn't encompass all of it by any means. This is something I could talk about for a very long time, but I just wanted to sort of highlight a few key points here that will hopefully empower you to be able to start making some changes. So first and foremost, if you're feeling a sense of numbness or deadness, chances are you've made labels take precedence over your experience of reality. So what does this mean? This is something we've all gone through and continuously participate in day-to-day, moment-to-moment, but we want to actually dig into what this means. So let's say as a young child, I come into the world and I haven't been socialized yet. I haven't been told what everything is and what everything means, and I haven't been through this whole system of classical conditioning or punishment and reward. And there's a sense of aliveness in everything in reality when you're in that state because everything is new, everything is a new experience. There's a richness and an aliveness and an ever-changing energy to everything that you experience because you haven't made everything mean something. You haven't assigned everything a label, a word, you haven't turned everything into concepts yet. So let's say that I'm in nature for the first time ever. I've never been outside. And let's say I'm a young child. I might go outside and I might see these huge trees and the beautiful richness of these trees and them moving in the wind, and every tree looks different and every tree has a different smell and moves differently. And there's something so new and amazing and alive about that experience. But let's say fast forward years and years, and let's say I go out into nature for the 1,000th time, and I've learned that those are trees. I go out and instead of really seeing the tree, I see the tree through the filter of a label that I've been conditioned to believe that it is. So I walk outside into nature and I don't see with a fresh set of eyes. I see through the filter of concepts. I see, a whole bunch of trees, okay, and I'm still just caught in my mind thinking of the future and what I have to do next and the past and what happened to me yesterday, and I lose that aliveness that brings that richness and need for exploration into my life. So when we go through life and we stop looking at things and actually looking, we just go through life just assuming labels and projecting our labels and sort of post-it notes of ideas of what everything is. We just project all of our concepts onto everything. When we're in a hyper state of doing that because we haven't paused or we haven't stepped out of that mindset, that ego mind that's always running, when we are just so identified with all of our concepts, we lose the aliveness from reality as a result of that. And so we stop looking at things and actually looking and actually participating. And we just assume we know what everything is and we go about our lives. And so it's sort of a deep and maybe abstract seeming concept, but there is tremendous value in trying to sit somewhere and just look at things, especially in nature. Just watch, just re-experience again just look without projecting so many concepts onto things and ideas. And what you'll see is, you know, initially your mind will probably have a hard time sitting still and just observing. Initially your mind will probably want to take you back into how it's been working and thinking about the deadline you have tomorrow and the things that happened to you that weren't good yesterday and the gifts you have to get for Christmas. And so try to watch and you know, sort of see what your mind does. It's an interesting way to bring some of that aliveness back just in that moment. So another thing, this is a huge thing. If we are sort of rooted in that sense of numbness, if that has been a pattern and a newly identified emotional state, chances are we have been immersed in thoughts and emotions that are producing that sort of output for quite some time, to the point where this has been ingrained in our nervous system and our body now accepts this as normal and works to just replay this pattern that we've experienced, because our nervous system goes, hey, it's working because we're surviving, and so I guess we're good. And that pattern in and of itself keeps perpetuating. So let me make this really clear. Let's say that over time, because of a negative circumstance in childhood or in my adult life, I started to think that things were meaningless or pointless, or there was no hope, or I'm always going to fail, or I'm not going to be good enough. And let's say I adopted this set of beliefs or thoughts in a pattern format. So I started thinking them often. Maybe I was in a new job and I felt really disempowered in a repetitive format, to the degree that I just started to keep running those patterns of thought, and I was identified with them. I never even knew necessarily fully consciously that I was thinking them in the first place. And whenever we are identified with thought or attached to thought, it means we are automatically believing it. And I'll explain this. So if I go to work and I'm at a new job, and let's say I am way overqualified for the job and I'd be a great fit, but let's say I've got some insecurities. And so let's say I start telling myself these stories about how my boss must be judging me and my coworkers don't think I'm quite good enough yet. And let's say I think out these thoughts, but I don't recognize that I'm thinking them because my mind is just going and going and going on autopilot. Each of these thoughts elicits its own emotional response. And so if I don't step out of that and go, whoa, I'm thinking and feeling this way, and it's not even necessarily true, I haven't even questioned it or dissected it, pulled it apart to see if it's valid. If I haven't done any of that, if those thoughts are running on autopilot, they are eliciting emotional responses and I am feeling accordingly, which means essentially I'm just believing whatever internal dialogue my mind is running. Now, if we take this and we apply it to the idea of us being in this state of meaninglessness or feeling pointless or numb or dead inside, chances are you've been running thoughts that are telling you that it's hopeless and it's pointless and you'll not be able to do anything and it's too hard, and chances are you're running really heavy patterns of thought. And this is not your fault. This would have been the result of conditioning or interpretations you made from experiences you had, or maybe even patterns of thought that you started having in order to protect yourself from being too hopeful and feeling like you'll be let down again. So these things are just adaptations that the subconscious mind makes, or aspects of the mind make, to try to protect us. But when they become patterns, and remember, most of our thoughts elicit an emotional output. So when they become these patterns of thought, we have patterns of emotional responses that over time get ingrained in our nervous system, and we see and feel the world that way. We habituate to these experiences. This just becomes the new normal. And so we experience that same emotional undertone. And it can be very heavy and disempowering. So next thing, so let me tell you what to do about that actually. So what you really want to do about that is you want to start thinking different thoughts. You want to intentionally think. There's a big difference between thinking all day on autopilot and actually thinking, actually intentionalizing thought. So you want to set times throughout the day where you can intentionally think and think lighter thoughts, more empowering thoughts, and start really general. Don't try to sit and think, oh, this is the best day ever, life is fantastic, when you're feeling really low. Start incrementally and gear up a little bit. Say, you know what, there is a little bit of hope if I control my thinking again, if I start making changes in the way I'm perceiving the world, or I'm getting better and better every day, or, you know, I control my mind and my thoughts when I choose to, and I always have that power. It doesn't go anywhere. Or start with thoughts that you know are true and that you can sort of climb up the rungs of the ladder of more empowering and more empowering thoughts, which will, of course, produce more empowering and more empowering emotional states. So, and again, then your brain and body will habituate to this, and this can become a new normal. Next, so when we sort of talked about this, but I think this is really important to note in a little bit more detail. So whenever we see our reality through the filter of concept and meaning, which everybody does to some degree, but when we're doing this to such great lengths, and reality is more about concepts and experiences, right? And I want to use the example of travel here. Like, oftentimes people report being so present when they're traveling, so fulfilled, they love it so much, because there's such a newness to that experience that it brings back that sense of aliveness again, because we're not just going into places with these sort of residual, habitual thought patterns of, oh, you know, I drive this way on the way to work, and there's this routine, and this is, you know, that's the building I work in. There's not this state of normalcy. There's novelty instead, and so we're forced to be more present in our environment and feel accordingly, and leave sort of an open space to explore and be receptive to new thoughts and feelings and ideas and experiences. So it's a good sort of analogy for us to recognize and how empowering that can be. But here's the thing. When we attach to concepts about ourselves, this can be really challenging because our brain will always equilibrate eventually. So because everything is based on perception in that mind space, in the ego mind space, as soon as we attach to a concept, it produces a subconscious expectation. So if I, let's say, tell myself that I am the hardest worker, okay, then that might be a pattern that I've been living for me to think that, right? I might have been working pretty hard. There might be some validity in that for me to think that. But what happens when I get burned out and then I can't work as hard? Now I'm not just burned out from working too hard, but I'm also suffering over that expectation, that identification I've made about who I am is now being broken down. And there's this loss of sense of identity, of sense of self. And in that, there's a tremendous amount of suffering that we go through that is not necessary. So when we attach to concepts, I'll give some more examples. Let's say people attach to, let's say a beautiful woman or a really attractive man attaches to this concept that they are the most beautiful or handsome man around. You know, what happens when they age? Now it's not just age and my body's adapting and adjusting and I have to take better care. Now it's we age and we have to deal with this grieving of the sense of self. We suffer through that attachment to this idea about who we are that's being broken apart. And if we attach to an expectation in a relationship, oh, this is the best partner, we never fight. You know, the moment you fight, there's a lot more weight on that, right? There's a lot more suffering induced. So whenever we attach, the mind produces, or whenever we attach an expectation, or we identify with something, the mind at some point will equilibrate and come down from that expectation. And the result of that will be more suffering. So we really want to stay rooted in our intentions for things without getting attached to expectations around things. Meaning, you know, I might intend to work really hard, going back to that first analogy, and to make sure that I show up well and provide a good example and good work ethic. But if I attach to a concept that I am the hardest worker around forever, or identify with something like that, then that will always have a come down process. Okay, so it's something you really want to be aware of. We want to stay rooted in what we want to create, what we want to intentionalize, without attaching to the concept or idea of how that should be. And oftentimes people are really struggling with a sense of meaninglessness or a sense of numbness. They've attached to a lot of concepts and they are constantly having these broken down identifications for things. And that just perpetuates this pain. And we keep, you know, refeeding that interpretation mechanism in the mind that says, oh, because we're in pain, it just reinforces how pointless everything is because we can't get ahead, we can't get out of this pain. And so it just feeds that cycle. So we want to intentionally work to move out of this and set the intentions to climb out of this through incrementally empowering our thoughts and thus our emotions, but without putting more pressure on ourselves or expecting that it's going to be, we'll be better by a certain time, or without, again, putting that expectation of outcome on ourselves, because we will have the come down process. And we want to sort of work towards, maybe I'll make a separate video about this, but we want to work towards staying rooted in our intentions as opposed to our expectations of things, as opposed to the clinging or the identification of things. And keep in mind too that sometimes the mind is sort of like, what's a good word, like seduced into identification, because sometimes our expectations that we identify with elicit emotional responses. Like if I fantasize about some goal I'm going to achieve, or some, conversation I'm going to have with my partner, it's going to be the best date or conversation ever. If I start thinking and running those things, then those expectations, my mind actually elicits dopamine responses and positive emotional responses, maybe some serotonin responses or oxytocin neurochemical reactions that make the expectations or the stories about my expectations seductive. It wants to draw me in. But we want to be able to notice this, bring our awareness to this in our lives so that we can step behind it and we can say, you know what, let me turn this into an intention instead. And this will be really empowering, but requires a little bit of attentiveness to self to begin. Another couple quick things. I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to make the next 2 points quite quick. But whenever we have a lot of future-based investments, it basically runs the same pattern that I was just mentioning. So essentially, if I'm always thinking about the future and I'm investing my energy into all these future outcomes and expectations, the moment, it's not possible that everything's going to meet our expectations 100% of the time. In fact, sometimes it's good that it doesn't, because we're forced to learn and grow and adapt and surrender a little bit and move through life in an undoing of self, not just this building of all of our identifications and personality. There's a quote I love, and it says, life is a balance between holding on and letting go. And I love that. I think it's sort of like monkey bars. You grab onto the next thing and then you see what's in front of you after that, and you grab onto sort of the next rung again. But in doing so, you always sort of have to let go of something behind you. And if we have such a hard time for that, with the letting go elements, we can become bitter or rigid, or we can be so overcome by fear. And this is something that can be a massive contributing factor to numbness. If we are so afraid, if we are living in this subconscious state of fear, it can be really hard to bring that aliveness into life again, that richness of novelty and new experiences and exploration. We almost like opt out of in advance. And again, it creates that sense of heaviness and powerlessness to different aspects of self. So this is the last thing, and it's quite an important point, but every moment, how will I say this? So when we are not being accountable for our thoughts and emotions, the natural byproduct of that is that we make our external experiences and concepts and ideas about how things should be responsible for our happiness. So for example, if I wake up and let's say it's my birthday, and I'm like, today has to be the best day ever. I know so many people who do this because it's my birthday. And so you wake up and then it's raining outside and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's raining on my birthday. Like in that very moment, you've outsourced your power. You've outsourced the power over your emotional state to something that you have no control over. And we spend a lot of time doing this as human beings. We give our emotions and our thoughts to what's going on outside of us instead of intentionally, creating an emotional state or having the thoughts about things that we want to. And so if we're not being accountable, and a good example, like every time that we are experiencing frustration, sadness, hurt, negative emotion in general, it's almost always a sign that we have given our power and the accountability for our happiness to the things outside of us, as opposed to intentionally creating and harvesting and nurturing the emotional state and the types of thoughts that we want to experience from the inside out. And as we do that, there becomes this rootedness and power in how we want to be moving about in the world, because we've made that choice, we've made that decision. And so if it's raining, I'm still going to have a good day. I'm not going to let anything ruin this day for me, you know. Or if I don't get the best outcome somewhere, you know, okay, great. How can I learn from this? What is this showing me? You know, we can adapt to things when we're rooted in our accountability for our thoughts and emotions. And keep in mind that, you know, while I very much believe in things like neurochemical imbalances and you know, the impacts of that on depression or anxiety, I want to let you know that you know, patterns of thought produce patterns of emotion, which of course are made up of neurochemical responses. So now you've got patterns of neurochemicals, and over time, when this is habituated into your nervous system, of course you have a neurochemical imbalance when you're thinking a lot of negative patterns of thought. And you can take a lot of that power back by changing your patterns of thought, which will thus change your patterns of emotion and change your neurochemical reactions that you're having on a regular basis. And if you can do that repetitively enough so that it becomes anchored and it becomes a new normal for your nervous system, for your body, then when you go out into the world, you show up according to how you would like to feel, how you've intentionally thought and felt, the state you've intentionally thought and felt yourself into, as opposed to the respondent or the victim to whatever's going on outside of you and whatever unconscious or autopiloted interpretations you make. So if this is a struggle for you, if this is something you're going through, this numbness or this feeling of deadness inside, I empathize so much. I hear you. I can't. I've seen how disempowering this can be and how heavy and challenging it can be. And I wouldn't set that expectation that this is something you climb out of immediately, but I would set the intention to start somewhere and start being gentle to yourself and your thinking, and to start trying to notice what you give your power away to, what expectations you have that are no longer serving you, or where do you try to derive positive emotions from things that you don't have control over, and take note of these different aspects and try to change in incremental steps. And as you do, you'll notice that you anchor these patterns into your subconscious mind, into your nervous system, and you start getting the results that you're looking for. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this or got a lot of value out of this video, please like it, please share it, please subscribe to our channel. And we will have some worksheets up on www.personaldevelopmentschool.com that help you with needs, with your subconscious values, all kinds of different things so you can sort of dig deeper into yourself and have some tangible tools that will assist you. Thank you so much for watching.